Well, good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming to this session on day 2 and not being on the shuttle to the airport. Appreciate that. So I'm Charlie Mulrooney. I have the distinction of leading the enterprise architecture team for SHI's Advanced Growth Technologies group. So we are the ones responsible for the AI lab that you saw yesterday. We have the AI lab team, and we do the prototyping for our customers, taking AI use cases and help them determine do they have the right data, what model, what training, what fine-tuning, et cetera, needs to be done so that they can look and see what a working prototype looks like and build a business case to move forward with that. We get to learn a lot more about some very interesting partners and what they bring to the table. And one of the most exciting partners that we're working with is Hammerspace. So today, what do I do with this? What did he say?
PowerPoint. We don't have any slides.
I don't have any slides. This is a PowerPoint-free zone. You're welcome. So Hammerspace is one of those partners that we just immediately connect with, and we can start to see the value. We found out about them about a little over a year ago, where we really started digging in to understand how they operate, how they help solve problems with us for our customers. And we thought it'd be a great opportunity to have a conversation today about data protection for AI pipelines. So with us today is Sam Newnam from Hammerspace. I'll let Sam introduce himself.
How's it going? Sam Newnam. I'm the Senior Director of AI Solutions at Hammerspace. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've worked with SHI across various aspects of my career. I spent time as a partner early on, spent a number of years at Nutanix, ran a couple of businesses, worked at Weka recently, and now at Hammerspace. And to walk into a company that is providing data pipeline acceleration. I think so many people think about how fast storage needs to be, and are we feeding GPUs fast enough? And Hammerspace takes a little bit of a different approach of saying, there's a data readiness component to all of this, right? It's like we can all buy GPUs and switches and download a large language model, but being able to get data to feed these things and the pipelines that are involved, I think are the complex parts that we're all trying to figure out as we try to get our enterprises, truly on track with AI.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So we have a couple of questions prepared. So we're gonna go through the questions, and this will ultimately, because I know Sam and he knows me, it'll probably turn more into a conversation than question and answer. So Sam, let's talk first about why data protection is critical to AI pipelines in any particular industry, but overall, why is that important and why is that critical?
I think it's a great question. I think to start, you have to define data protection, right? I think so much traditionally we thought about it as backup, right? I'm the backup guy. Did we make a copy of these files? But the truth is around AI pipelines and the way data is moving across these big horizontal workflows, it's not about data protection in one place, right? It's about the integrity of that data, it's the availability of that data, and the recoverability of those particular flows as well. And so as organizations go to look at this, it isn't just copying 15,000 files into a directory and all of a sudden I've run some RAG pipeline and my information's searchable. It's like that was day one. How do those pipelines continue to operate? How do we make sure they're resilient? How do we make sure that marketing data and finance data and R&D data all assemble in the right times at the right places? And the trouble is that's not even just on-prem. It's happening in your data center. It's happening in the cloud. It's happening in your SaaS applications. And so I think data protection now has a much bigger, broader awareness, right? That isn't just backup in the way we used to think about it, but it's how do we recover to a point in time within this particular pipeline without having to restart an entire process.
That's right. So I look at it as from the customers that we're talking to, for them, it's really about that prevention of loss of time invested in what they've done so far. And instead of starting over, it's starting from a known point, right? So yeah, that's very, very important. So there are different conversations with AI and pipelines for AI versus traditional data and traditional storage.
Yeah, I think just to stick on that, I think the point is a lot of us come from backgrounds where we think about point-in-time recovery in databases, right? It's kind of how we try to help our customers think about it. It's like, oh, how do you do a backup every hour? How do you do log rollbacks to certain point in times? How do you capture a number of transactions? When you're dealing with millions and billions of files, that becomes very different, right? It's not that file systems are logged the same way and recoverability is the same way. And so it becomes an overwhelming problem. And I think that's why it's so important to look at, because most organizations, you hear the stats that, 20% of IT projects succeed, right? Which means 80% fail. And of those 20%, very few ever get culturally adopted. And part of that comes to the integrity of that data. And so part of it's also the size. It's very hard to take a project that we've done, that we've experimented with and, done our little MVP or proof of concept, and then to move that into production. The first 10,000 files you ran were great. The next hundreds and thousands of files from that organization are much harder to accumulate, and to your point, take hours and massive amounts of human time to assemble.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear the different conversations as you get into this. It's things that you didn't think about that way before. All of a sudden, it's a new way to approach it. So what do you think are the biggest risks to those AI pipelines? And what do you think that means to the impact of innovation for those people?
Yeah, so let's start from a point of ROI, right? If you think about how quickly AI should return ROI into a business, we're not talking about 2 and 3 year outcomes. We're talking about weeks and months of outcome.
Right.
We're spending millions, of dollars in massive amounts of infrastructure and time. And so the risk to not getting it right. So most people look at AI as they think about, first to discovery, first to patent, first to any of these types of things within our organizations. And so all of a sudden, this becomes one of the most critical products, right? Every leader thinks, oh, we've got to be in AI to be highly competitive. If we're not, we're going to get surpassed by our competition across any vertical or industry. And so I think putting these pipelines together have historically looked like, enterprise data was scattered across the organization, right? We stuffed it in every corner. We were, doing 2 or 3 IOPS, a home directory. And now all of that data that has the context and business value now needs to be performant. It needs to be assembled. And you've got a 26-year-old data scientist walking into your organization wanting God-level access to everything. Yes. And it's like that pipeline becomes a huge problem between InfoSec and the security teams and the application and BUs that own that data.
Yeah, valid point. I remember the days when the pharma research teams would explain that first to market meant easily $1 million in revenue advantage to those who got there first. I know that number has changed since then, but that was eye-opening for getting into those conversations early on in the high-performance compute days. So let's think about checkpointing. We touched on that already. So let's do this. Let's think about modern data protection strategies, and how does Hammerspace contribute to that? It's a very different animal. We don't build redundancy in AI environments like we would in your traditional data center environment. So it's not, hey, I'm building highly available systems. It's, you start over at some point. It fails, you start over, and you have to have a place to start from. But it's very different. Even people listening to Jensen at NVIDIA, we're not building highly available, high performance AI clusters. The clusters are there for the compute power share, but it's not there for failover capabilities. So how does Hammerspace play in the data protection strategy space?
I think it's a great question. I think that goes back to where is data coming from and where is data going to? And so as we think about, generative AI was single shot. We could do that in a data center. We could train on massive amounts of information. That's where checkpointing came in, right? How do I recover in that particular stack? And that made a lot of sense when it was all in the same pod. What we're seeing with agentic AI and where physical AI is going, and as we look at, edge inference and these types of things, is our data doesn't live in one place, and whether it's sourced or being delivered to that point, we're now looking at these multi-global, multi-stream type workflows. And so Hammerspace, basically enables a global file system. And so the magic sauce behind is we basically separate our metadata from the data itself. And so now if I have a file up here in Tokyo, it can appear in New York instantaneously. And then we can use orchestration and our intelligence to make decisions about should it live there, should it live in the cloud, those types of things. But the trouble is that historically, this was all done by tickets and storage admins, right? It's like, oh, I need to relocate a terabyte of data from my on-prem system to this cloud. And sometimes the data scientist has that ability, sometimes it's in these storage things, but now it's going through all sorts of security measures as well. There's a PII in there where things anonymized, all this sort of stuff. And so these flows of data have become very complex, and even modeling where data has been, being able to track the lineage and traceability, right? If I go run a RAG pipeline or fine tune a model and it starts, we've heard the horror stories about CEO salaries showing up in that data. How do I go find a particular file stream that came from, remove that embedding, go find the source data for that, remove it from the flow? Like, these things have lives of their own, right? And we're not even at the point where we've really seen agents start having all these conversations and moving data. We've talked about governance agents and agents that can make actionable decisions, and we're starting to see this world become highly complex. And if you don't have a platform sitting underneath that helps assemble storage, that creates these automated workflows, I think most organizations are going to struggle with the manpower to try to keep the tooling up to date to make these solutions work.
Yeah, very valid point. So when we think about, when you look at that data protection, what do you see as emerging trends in protecting AI and AI pipelines?
Yeah, so part of it, I think there's two speeds to storage. We've talked about tiering our entire lives and career, but the truth is that any of our data needs to be as fast as possible when it's being used. It needs to be as economical as possible when it's not. And so still the number one use case for cloud right now is backup. Data protection,
yes.
Right? As much as we've all moved our VM workloads and SaaS application stuff, still one of the best things because it's affordable and because it was global. It was one way an organization could move their data to somewhere else and grab it from a different region, from a different country,
right.
Those sorts of things. And so, part of the trends I see is, well, how do we make data globally available? And so backups used to say, hey, I'm going to have one copy here. I'm going to have my second copy somewhere else, and maybe I stick the third one in Iron Mountain in the blue box like we used to back in the day.
I remember.
And but the reality is now is that if these AI pipelines are going to be as critical as we think they are, that data has to be instantly recoverable somewhere, right? So how do I keep multiple copies of it? What am I doing with copy data management? Can I do really cheap storage in Glacier or these S3 buckets and still rehydrate it to a performance solution when I need to recover those things? And so part of it, to your point, it's very expensive to buy redundant GPU clusters, but I think we're also seeing a lot of edge inference come into play, right? We're making decisions on 4K video, facial object recognition at the edge, those types of things, and then trying to centralize all of the decisions we made, maybe not the raw data, but the decisioned data, right, back to a central location. And so the trends I see is that people are starting to find new ways to find, hey, can I process data, and did I get all the information out of it and throw away the raw material? And be able to keep just the embeddings or the outputs or the clips of video that had a human or a truck or an object in it without keeping hours of video going down the road of wildlife.
Right, the relevant pieces.
100%.
Yeah, I know we've heard Jensen again talking about next year being the year of physical AI, but I think there's the year of the edge is coming there too, because holy smokes, there's a lot of exploring and conversations about doing things at the edge. So yeah, I agree with that, and it's an interesting challenge for customers to think about what is the right data to have available and accessible, and how to best serve that, how to best meet those needs. So it's going to get very, very interesting.
Yeah. I'll add to that too. I think classification of data has become more important as well.
Yes.
So part of it is like, it's not just does one piece of data live, right? We could back up petabytes of information within our organization. And we've always tiered this, right? We've done this with applications forever, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. We're starting to do the same things with our data. So what's most relevant, what's critical to these processes, what's nice to have, and then what are things that we could rebuild or recapture if we need to. So I think a lot of these data protection strategies start with an engineering mindset of how relevant, how fiducially worthwhile is that particular data. And we're seeing organizations make these ROI calculations of, if I do or don't have that, does it impact my business process tomorrow?
It's funny, as part of that classification, we see they come out of the woodwork. Hey, I found this old storage system, tucked away in a corner here, and there's data on there, and I'm not really sure if we're supposed to have it anymore, if we need the data that's on there, what it belongs to. Somebody's nodding their head like, yeah, I know that story. And how do you make sure that that's classified? How do you make sure that that's available if it should be? And if it's not, and it doesn't meet the criteria of things that you're supposed to have, that you can figure that out, identify that, and get rid of it as well. So it's about the relevance. It's about that classification. It's a very important piece of all of this for sure. So let's think about, we have 8 minutes. Let's think about so if you were to say to people that were looking at what's their next step for, hey, I have a lot of storage in-house. I have different OEMs represented in my data center today. I'm looking to plan out my strategy for data, because it's now less about storage, it's more about data. If I'm going to plan out my strategy for data and accessibility of data, what do you think a piece of advice for customers looking at that might start with, if we just do the starting point?
Yeah, so I'll date myself as a G.I. Joe fan growing up, right? They always said knowing's half the battle.
Yes.
And so what we find, to your point, is with things across multiple vendors, hybrid cloud strategies, we think assembling data is a great first step.
Yep.
So how do we get all this under the purview of a single pane of glass? I think we've always wanted this in IT, right? And everyone's promised it for years, and sometimes it's been hard to deliver. But the truth is that AI doesn't think about file structures, to your point, shares and volumes and RBAC and all the stuff we've done historically, right? It looks at this data bill of materials. It's like, hey, I want to push these 27,000 files through this particular process. I don't care where they live. I don't care who owned them. That's up for somebody else to figure out. I just want them because I'm going to go build this massive thing that's going to solve the world's problems. And so part of me says, we kind of take an approach of like simplify, automate, and accelerate. And so I think in the world of AI right now, everybody keeps saying, hey, go buy a really fast piece of storage, stick it under your GPUs, make a second copy of all your stuff on my platform, right? And then we'll go do all the magic. And the reality is every enterprise keeps asking, how do I build this AI factory or this support chatbot or business intelligence search with what I have today? And so my advice is, there are tools and platforms like ours and others, right? I don't want this to just be a commercial, but the reality is that we can use today's infrastructure to be able to assemble this, right? That's part of Hammerspace's vision is if I can take, the NetApp and Pure and Isilon and everything that's existed in this environment through leadership changes and, partnerships and all sorts of stuff, push this together in a single environment. We've always wished that we could do global collaboration, right? And you even talked about these pipelines. That's one thing I ran across a customer the other day that deleted, one data scientist deleted someone else's workspace, right? And trying to make some more space, I bring this up, but like these data pipelines are critical, and you're talking about terabytes of information now that had to be rebuilt, reassembled, those type of things. But the idea about pushing this all together in a single environment, then it becomes much easier to think about these pipelines. Where should data live? How do we get it to the right place at the right time on the right tier? And then lastly is, the acceleration portion. And so it's the ability of, I think organizations are struggling to get, we measure AI in time to first token, right? How quickly can I ask a question, it go through the system, pop this thing back out? But I think organizations are struggling with their time to very first token.
Yep.
And I think, we and others have a solution to help capture that data, catalog that data, move that into a platform that future-proofs organizations. Because that's the other thing is that, my job's really hard. And it's, sometimes I think it's fun to have this title, Senior Director of AI Solutions. The reality is I spend so much time listening to podcasts and all sorts of stuff and reading every publication out there because what was relevant AI yesterday, 2 weeks from now has changed and there's some new model or some new thing. And so part of it is my advice is, there's a lot of platforms and solutions and stuff that will stick you in their minutia, right? It's
Right.
like, hey, subscribe to me and we'll do everything for you. We've got a much more open stance, right? We were built on Linux. We got this open standards kind of mentality, and we're much bigger on partnering with people because whatever cataloged your data yesterday, somebody's going to come out with a new model that's going to auto catalog stuff. They're going to be better at PII. Great. How do we plug that in quickly? And so, think about a platform. Think about organizing your data in a way that you have a single endpoint, right? Your security connects to it. Your catalog connects to it. Data protection tools connect to it. Like, we're in this place of global data management, and it can't be done across 18 different silos and logins.
I completely agree. Well, I think that is going to wrap it for us for today. I appreciate everybody spending some time with us. We're going to step off, but we'll be over in the corner. And until we're ready for the next general session, if you have any questions, you can come over and visit us and ask away. Again, I appreciate your time today. And Sam, I thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity.